Connor's in the hospital. Yeah. Start.
Ooh.
Sorry.
You all right?
I'm good.
All right, calling to order the Board of Supervisors and School Board Joint Work Session.
Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone.
Good
Thank
job.
you for joining us tonight. So really our goal for tonight is to have some conversation on three main topics. The first is really an opportunity for the Board of Supervisors to engage with the school board and Dr. Armstrong as a follow-up to his presentation on March the 3rd. A lot of great information was shared in that setting. However, we were a little bit rushed as the agenda got a little lengthy and we had another meeting that we had to get to. I wanted to start off there to see if there was anything from the board's standpoint that they needed clarity of the team from the schools on. And then after we're able to have a conversation there, really dial in and talk about what we see as the local transfer for the schools for fiscal year 2027. I think that given the time of where we are in mid-March and an impending approval on May 5th, as we look forward to the next couple of weeks, really providing clarity regarding what the Board of Supervisors are thinking along those lines so that ultimately the school division can plan as they head into contract and hiring season. And then also the last thing on the agenda would be an opportunity to learn about some of the capital projects that the school has and ultimately, what their ask is of our community in the future as we look at not only operations but capital. So really three main topics, but wanted to kick it off really and see if there are any follow-up questions from the Board of Supervisors or Dr. Armstrong, anything you wanted to share as a follow-up to your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Rayleigh and board members. Thanks for having us this evening. I know I did share quite a bit of information 2 weeks ago on Tuesday. A lot of the slides that you see, I know you've been provided on paper, are really repeats of what you saw, just for reference. I don't have a presentation per se. I know there were a couple questions about enrollment. I did a little more digging on that. Did want to make sure that I provided just a little more detail about salary, since we're going to be talking about the transfer amount, just the priority we have on that. And did add a few slides about our CIP for the upcoming fiscal year, as well as what we have in mind for the CT addition secondary improvement. So really for your reference more than anything, and happy to take any questions. Got my team here. Appreciate them being here this evening too, who can also step in and answer things that I can.
Any questions?
I wonder if this is the first time since the budgets have been presented that we've been together in a workshop forum, if the school board would have anything that they'd want to say or ask or comment or.
No, I think we're here to hear what your questions are and be able to give feedback for what questions you have in it.
So for me, the big question is priorities, right? So what are the main priorities? I feel like this year was presented much more definitively. I'd kind of like to hear, just from y'all's perspective, like what's important to y'all.
From the board members first, if you want to chime in.
Our teachers,
Okay.
and to hopefully see at least a minimum of 3% for teachers and administration. And that would be my first. I can keep on going, but if you ask for day
Sure.
one.
Well, yeah.
Personally, I agree. I agree. Our teachers are the ones that care for all the students in the school and have the tough job of bringing down everything that's coming down from the school board as far as what needs to be implemented. So we want to make sure that our teachers, we keep and maintain well-qualified teachers.
Spoon, Howard, and for the board to expand on that a little bit. I think the only, I think the board and I appreciate your feedback too about how we presented the budget 2 weeks ago. The only downside is that in past years you've had kind of that list of priorities off the top, which can sometimes muddle the needs a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that just to be crystal clear, that none of the work that we do in the school division, our facilities, the achievement we get on behalf of our kids, dual enrollment, CTE, any of that happens without our professionals. That's our teachers, our custodians, our bus drivers, our food service personnel, our leadership. Every single person wears a badge. So my first priority would be to ensure that we continue to support them with a market competitive raise and benefits. And then, once that's really the nucleus of everything else that happens with this budget and with our division.
What about the weapons detection systems? Is that in the budget, or is that getting pushed to next year's budget?
What we, and thanks for asking that. First step on that is going to be to assemble our Safe Schools Task Force. And you all may have heard about this. We've traditionally, historically had a safety facilities committee. It's met at regular, it's a board advisory committee. We are going to implement a new Safe Schools Task Force. It's going to be a much more just broad-based group of stakeholders from across the community. I hope to include at least one of our supervisors, Dr. Rayleigh, community members, to help make recommendations on a lot of those safety focused items that we have. Our weapons detection, originally when we started talking about this probably a year ago, even before I got here, the price of that was going to be somewhere in that $500,000 plus range. And as we continue to talk to vendors and get demonstrations, we found a much more affordable option. So we feel we can hopefully be able to handle the cost of that probably and turn back into the year funds, rather than have to do that through capital or operating funds. Now, the side of that, though, that will need to be included in operating, that you'll see, is the stipends that we would have for those who are going to be helping to operate those systems.
Okay.
Now, whether or not that gets off the ground in the upcoming fiscal year depends on the timing of how we get this task force assembled, making a recommendation, acquiring the equipment, installing it. It's a pretty detailed process. If you've been by other schools in the area, it's going to represent a lot of time to get kids into buildings as we fine-tune this over time. But it is still on the radar, but I think for the purpose of purchasing the equipment, that'll be something we'll probably get out of our end-of-year funds.
Okay. Anyone else?
And you, going back to your presentation at the supervisors meeting, it was core budget and then tier 1 and tier 2 that you presented, correct?
The way we articulated it was really to put all the needs out there.
Yeah.
And I didn't tier them at that point. I figured we would start big with all of our needs and then distill from there once we have an idea what the segments are.
Okay.
Mr. Lyle, do you have anything?
No, I don't.
Anything, Dr. Wade?
I do not. Dr. Armstrong, you provided some slides related to enrollment trends, students with disabilities, class sizes. I didn't know if there were any highlights there that you wanted to share for the board and the public as well.
Happy to hit those highlights. This first slide, when we talked about enrollment, I think I've made an effort with my team this year to be a lot more transparent from the front end about enrollment and trends that we're seeing right now in our division. You all probably remember I mentioned 2 weeks ago that we're seeing nationwide and state trends of declining public school enrollment right now. We are bucking that trend in Richland, and you can see here, this is the first time in a long time that we've seen a steady 2-year plus increase in enrollment. Most of the time it's at kind of punctuated equilibrium where it's up and down, it's like an EKG, but we've seen a fairly steady increase for the last few years. We did kick off our housing yield and enrollment update study, and Dr. Wagner, when do we anticipate that will be complete? Great. So looking forward to getting the results from that. I did add this. This is a new slide here, and Mr. Lyle, I think you were on the cusp of asking a question about our special education enrollment. I know a few of you have asked about that as well. These are a couple of statistical points just to consider nationwide, where we've seen well over 300,000 students since 2023 who now qualify for special ed services in the country. Most of that, 40%, is accounted for by students with autism. And then you can see the breakdown in the disability types that constitutes what we see right now with enrollment nationwide. Here in Goochland, we've seen a steady uptick, definitely a jump from 24-25 to 25-26. I think I mentioned that when I came in front of you all in October. Of the 47 new students we had, over, I think, 25 of them were students who were receiving some type of special education service. putting a dollar amount on that is difficult because there's a continuum of services a student gets that could range anywhere from a one-to-one targeted assistance aid, an adult that has to be with the student all day, to just consultative services during the day that really don't represent any additional dollars per se. But I think it's worth watching. And Ms. Franklin Murray's here too, and she and I work together to support our team in that. But it's scrutinized significantly, it's litigious. We have incurred legal fees because of a lot of our work with exceptional education, just because of some situations that we've dealt with, which is not unique among other school divisions. So there is a fiscal impact to that as well, but hard to really pin a dollar amount on completely. And then you saw this is just, I was making the point that our enrollment this year was even above what this study had predicted 2 years ago. And then gave you the spreadsheet.
Before you move along, let us say, are we, from a facilities perspective, able to handle the growth that's projected here?
We are. Now, I want to be careful because these numbers you see here, I think are going to look different when we get this update that we're going to get here in 6 to 8 weeks. Our facilities right now, and I'm coming off the top of my head here, but are still not, mostly are falling in that upper 80s, lower 90s in terms of capacity percentage range in our facilities. It's something we're going to need to dig in on more to see as we continue to see our enrollment projections, but I can't give you, I'm not going to dance around it, can't give you a clear answer on that right now. We'll look at that.
I think as we move forward, we hear a lot. We believe we've made significant infrastructure commitments and investments. And as we look at how, as neighborhoods are developing, I think that's always a big key component. So I'm looking forward to seeing that new data. You guys just keep talking.
We did include a housing yield as part of that study
Right.
too, so that we can make sure we give feedback to county staff as they look at all those applications.
Great.
Kind of following up, and I'm probably 2 slides back. What? 2 slides forward.
2 slides forward.
That one.
Now we're chow-chow.
There you go. If you didn't have any special education or special help with the acronym, SPE,
Yeah, special education.
how would your budget be affected? You're saying you can't quantify it, but at some point, you can. You have to.
So, if
Don't
we
you?
were to,
That's a
yeah,
question.
and
I don't want to be declared.
I could do the calculation. I'm sitting there looking at Sarah and Stephanie, but if we were to take the number of dollars we put into exceptional education for additional resources and for staffing, we also get some additional aid for that as well. It would take a minute, but we can come up with a number.
Well, and why I'm asking is that I want to make sure you're supported.
Right.
And I don't want to see a surprise where it's like, yeah, we really need another $500,000.
Right.
And so if you can come to us early in the process and say, and I had a sidebar conversation, some families are moving to Goochland because of the exceptional needs programs. I mean, we're attracting that additional cost, investment. It's not a cost, it's an investment in my world. So as Dr. Rayleigh knows, I have gotten way into the weeds on the budget because it's important. The budget and rezoning are the 2 most important things I think the Board of Supervisors does. And if we're going to properly support the schools, you got to help us, brother. I mean, tell us what these needs are going to be. And I will speak for myself. I will want to look for a way to provide that support. But I can't give you a blank check.
I think if you've met one student with a disability, you've met one student with a disability because each child has their own unique needs, anywhere from a child with a learning disability to someone with a visual impairment. And the cost of educating a child with a visual impairment could rise as much as $200,000 to meet the unique needs of that child. So that's where there are individual differences, but ultimately, a child could move in tomorrow with some needs that we have to ultimately support as a community. But that's where the communication would go into, we have this child who enrolled, we want to make sure that their needs are met, but it's an unbudgeted expense, and that's where we can communicate.
Right, and while we don't have a perfect crystal ball on what's going to happen in kindergarten enrollment time, I know that our team has a great handle on what we currently have in our system. But April 9th,
Yep.
kindergarten enrollment, April 10th rolls around, and let's say we did have a student here enrolled who had some type of visual disability, and that was going to be additional dollars, then we will absolutely communicate that with you all.
I saw 15, I'm sorry.
Okay.
15% of the special needs were being categorized as autism. And for better or worse, I'm seeing a number of news reports about this being a very soft situation that needs to be addressed. And that there have been some excessive costs incurred, not investments, but costs and reimbursements on that. Is there a process that somebody says my child's autistic and that's validated, or is it just done on, okay, you said your child's autistic, we accept that, and now we're going to put in the SPED?
A couple different paths to that, and Sarah, I'm going to defer to you a little bit here, but we have a child study process, which happens within our school system, where if a child, if there's any idea on behalf of a parent or a teacher or anyone, they can convene a child study where they can evaluate that, perform testing, and make that determination. We also have students who would maybe come in with something from a medical professional. Sarah, I'll let you speak to that for a second.
Yeah, I mean, the big answer is yes, there's definitely a process, it's pretty extensive.
Sarah, I apologize. Who are you?
I'm the
sorry.
Director of Exceptional Education, thank you for asking, I'm Sarah Franklin Murray, yeah. So there is a process, it's pretty extensive, and some folks do come to us with medical diagnoses, but we still go through the educational side of that to determine how they're impacted in school. So it's a very individualized process that our school psychologists are pretty involved in, and from there, in the development of any kind of individual plan, we have, again, multiple experts involved in that.
To follow up with I think the heart of what Mr. Lyle is really getting at is, while we appreciate this chart, it shows the enrollment, for budgetary purposes, I think it'd be better illustrated if it was cost, the cost of the 2022, 2023, 2023. Yeah, but just because it would give us at least a target.
A trend.
Right, a trend that we can use as a plus or minus expected cost or increased cost, year over year. It's just my 2 cents. Do you have something?
Yeah, I want to be careful with this one because I want to stay in my lane as a supervisor. But this is a budget needs question. The thing that I hear in the street most, and this is anecdotal at best, it's people I know that talk to me, the area that seems I get the most, folks are most verbally, where the most challenge is in supporting special education. That seems to be a pretty stressful job, stressful area, and you hear folks say we need more folks in that area. Do you agree with that assessment? Like if there was an area that was more stressed than the other, that's that. And does this budget address that, or doesn't it need to?
It's interesting, we had this conversation just today even with our principals, and
it wasn't one of them.
no, they're good. I wouldn't say it's a need for more people. I think we need to we can do more to kind of mobilize the resources out there to train up the people we have. Because like you said, it's highly specialized, litigious work, and the range of work that you're doing from being in, let's say, Ms. Steely's self-contained classroom where they're working with students who are nonverbal, they're diapering students, all the way to a collaborative teacher who may be working with students in a mainstream classroom. It's a tremendous amount of work. There's case management involved in addition to teaching in classes, but I don't think it's a manpower issue. Now, you will see in the budget, we requested one additional elementary sped teacher.
Yep.
Because we saw some additional enrollment in our self-contained students, that Amanda Steely situation I gave you at Randolph. But for the most part, I think we can really tackle that by being purposeful about our training for those employees that we have.
If I read into your goal one needs, and we're focused on curriculum and instruction, the way I hear you, what you just said is with these 13 point, yes, this is where each FT comes from.
Right.
But this is what allows us to reallocate to best meet the needs across the entire, school division, rather than there's a hole in the dike, let's plug that one,
Right.
let's plug this one. You're looking at it holistically and how we maintain already good performance and hopefully notch it up to great.
And I will tell you, Mr. Waters, this slide that you're looking at here, I color coded these. This is the one place where, the question that come up today, hey, which positions would be like top priority right now? If resources were very finite, which I know they are. And you can see there that the number one thing I always look at is accommodating our enrollment growth to ensure that our class sizes remain small, which is what we're known for. It's good for our teachers, it's good for our kids, it's good for our families. I mentioned the elementary sped teacher, middle school math, our core academic work, and then there at the top of that kind of second tier would be our CTE expansion, elementary encore, high school band, and then you can see kind of the tier 3 positions, if you call them that, usually down the bottom. But yes, this would be a holistic look. This
I
one.
don't know if you want to get into the detail, but we could talk a little bit about a couple of reports that we have to provide to the state in regards to our special education students, maintenance of effort and excess cost. And in going through those exercises, we make sure that we have spent at least as much on our special education students as we have on a regular education student. Because VDOE will tell you first and foremost, they are a general ed student first. But just looking at our 24, fiscal year 24 data, it looks like an elementary special ed student costs $22,900 to educate in comparison to a gen ed student at $14,000. That includes all of your sources of funding, federal, state, and local. It goes significantly down for your high school students. I think that probably, logically, you would spend more money on your elementary students just because they would need more supervision at a younger age, but Sarah might can speak to that a little bit more as well.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, that's helpful. And just, you've also helped me, last year Dr. Cromartie had given a number, it was 18,000 per student, and the county absorbing or contributing, investing 15 of that 18 because of the comprehensive.
LCI,
Yeah,
local process.
and so I'm just now hearing it's not quite as
Well,
expensive.
Yeah,
Well, that 18 is probably an average.
Perhaps.
Yeah, 24.
Don't ask me to do math on a Tuesday afternoon.
I mean, our per pupil expenditures for 24-25, a total was 17.5 approximately.
All right, okay.
And local funds pay for about 12,000 of that. So the rest is funded through state
Okay,
and federal funds.
gotcha. Thank you.
Dr. Braley,
You want to talk a little bit about, you have some slides in here related to salary and
Yes.
health insurance.
I do. The only update I made to this is I talked to Mr. Straley out in Louisa. They're doing 3% plus a step, so their raise they're proposing is going to be closer to probably a 4% raise for their teachers, where our 3% includes a step. So,
Our step is 1.2%.
Roughly, the intervals are.
It depends
right
on the
about that.
steps.
Yeah,
Yeah, 1
yeah.
through 12 is 1.2%, and then as you get further down, it's 1% for the step.
And I know you all saw and have probably seen some of the proposed raises from our market competitors in the area. And 3% would keep us positioned where we are now. When you look at that median and where we fall, we have made a lot of progress. I think we're competitive in the state. I think we're competitive in our region now. And that 3% would keep us in a good position moving forward. The cost of that, you can see here, I highlighted this is from the same slide you had last time, but the cost of that 3% raise is 1.1 million when you combine your local, state, federal funds roughly. Talk a little bit about the health insurance. I know the 9.1% increase is something that we are working with as well as the county. That's the same insurance premium increase for every one of the county agencies. Our proposal was to share that cost, and it's highlighted up there in that orange, where we would absorb half of the increase for our K-250, which is our most generous plan. We would absorb 75% of the 500, then we would keep high deductible whole, being that high deductible tends to, for an organization, be probably the most prudent plan if you're looking at your experience and your rates overall. And then that would cost about $336,000 if we were to absorb the entirety. And so that means that we absorb 100% of the increases across every tier. That would bump us up to about $470,000. If we wanted to absorb the entirety and then give our school employees the same rates that our county employees have, it would cost us another about 90 grand to do that, about 583. So our proposal, and something we've done for years, is when we see a rate spike, we typically propose to share the cost. I'm not saying that I would not love to go ahead and absorb it on behalf of our employees, because as you all know, and you heard Dr. Rayleigh, that's money out of your back pocket. You're getting a 3% raise, but you're paying more every month on your insurance premium. But we did run those numbers for you.
You mentioned, Louisa, you spoke to them, plus the STEP. I'm sorry if I didn't grasp it.
Yeah.
What does STEP stand for? Is that the insurance? Or
No,
is
the
it-
step will be years of experience. So if you have a successful year of experience, you move up to scale one step.
Okay.
So,
Yes, so they sign a contract and then there's a schedule, and every year they meet the needs and then they get an increase
yeah.
contractually.
Well, I mean, so I guess to give us more of an apples to apples comparison, if we're looking at the salary increase landscape, I would make the argument that the 583 number is really, I'd make the argument the 583 number to keep schools in line with all county staff and employees is a goal to strive for. What would that, I mean, would that get a double star, or would that, I mean, where would that put us on that chart? Because I think that is a big
It is. And
outreach.
So this chart, and I appreciate that, this chart doesn't reflect what these other divisions are going to experience in their health insurance premium increases. I do know for a fact that we're fairly competitive with our health benefits. I think Louisa's got more of an increase this year. So they're going to get that 4% raise, but their employees who are participating in their health plan are going to see a little more money taken out of their pocket month to month because of their health insurance premiums. So I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
And I would want to look at that, Mr. Waters, because there's been years that the schools were able to do things that we weren't able to do. So
Yeah.
they were able to
Yeah.
give higher raises than we did.
Yeah.
They were able to cover 100% of costs, we did not. So
Yeah.
we gotta just be careful with that.
Dr. Armstrong, do you know if there are other localities that are doing this healthcare offset, cost share, whatever the terminology is?
We did an analysis of where we stack up against everyone else's rates. I don't know some of the competitors, the Enricos, Chesterfields of the world, how much that they're absorbing. I know they absorb at least part of it. I think there's at least a cost sharing approach they take to it. I don't know exactly what it is, but and then it's not the kind of thing sometimes that goes public.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I didn't know if you
We
heard
can
it
do
through
some
rumor mill or like a.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I'm just gonna put the elephant in the room. Is there a reason the county can adopt the process that the schools are doing? And that is, if you want fundamental basic health care with 1,000 deductible, we'll absorb that. But if you wanna upgrade, and I'm using an airline analogy, to Comfort Plus, you're gonna pay a little more. And if you wanna go first class, you're gonna pay a little more. Why would we not want to adopt a process where we actually pay and absorb the cost, but you're flying coach? If you want to fly Comfort Plus or first class, you got to pony up a little bit too, not the entire amount. I'm appreciative that the schools are saying, hey, we've got you covered with health care, and we're going to cover that premium, but it's a partnership. I mean, and so I was trying to do the math in my head for those people that are saying, well, you know, I do want a $250 deductible. That's great. It's an option, but it's not on us. You got to pony up a little bit too. Is there a reason we couldn't look at that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. May. Yeah, so it's a valid question, Mr. Lyle, and so one of the things that
I'd like to ask.
one of the things that I did as I was developing my proposed budget for the Board of Supervisors' consideration was to look at similar scenarios like that. I think one of the things that may be different between county government and the schools is the distribution of our workforce and the plans that our workforce is choosing to take. For example, we have 55% of our workforce that chooses the $250 deductible plan. So it's a philosophical decision. Any sort of changes where we would force them to go to a different, or incentivize them to go to a different level, would have an impact on a significant majority of our workforce. And so as I evaluated that, I chose to leave things as is because I wanted to maintain benefits for the vast majority of our workforce and the choices that they're making. Now, we could certainly change that. That's certainly within the purview of us as a team, but my recommendation was evaluated that because I had done something similar in a previous life, and so was aware of those options, but did not choose to make that recommendation.
I'll just speak to private sector. When I was faced with these kind of scenarios, we had to make the tough choice and said, look, if you want gold plate, you gotta chip in. You gotta ante up a little bit, but we did cover the basics. And I say the basics, the entry level, the 1,000 HMO is what they were back in my day. So if you wanted HMO coverage, we have you covered. Now, if you wanted to go to something with a PPO, working from memory here what these things were called, but you still had the option, and we would help a little bit, but it wasn't 100%.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, I appreciate the school's approach, which is if you want to fly first class, chip in either some miles or money. If you're okay flying coach,
Yeah.
we got you covered.
I think something else too with going into any public service job. People say, the salary is not what you're gonna make if you're working down at CarMax or Capital One, but the benefits are usually enticing, the retirement plans. That's what historically kept people in these jobs. It's not going as far anymore as it used to. So I think it is important to keep our benefits competitive.
Oh, I do too. I do too.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
So the bills have gone to the governor now. My quick list, looking at what Paul's provided us, it appears that there don't seem to be too many. The biggest financial impacts would be for at-risk schools, which I don't believe that it's going to really negatively impact us. So do you feel confident that we're not going to get a big surprise out of Richmond that we have to talk about? All right, what else?
I don't anticipate there being a negative surprise. Hopefully, if any surprise we're gonna get, it's gonna be slightly positive.
Nice.
But of course, with our LCI, we're never gonna get a windfall by any means. But we do need to keep in mind that the caboose budget does require a $1,500 bonus for all employees, which we would only get about $98,000 of that. It's gonna cost us, Stephanie?
Over $500,000.
Over $500,000. So, any money we get from the state, we probably have to put it toward that, honestly. It does make it kind of difficult, but I don't think we're gonna get anything that's gonna drop in our lap. It's gonna force us to have to really think too much more critically about it.
So Dr. Armstrong just did some quick math, and if the school division were to provide a 3% salary increase and then absorb the 10% or the 9.1% increase based on current rates, that cost would be $1,565,677. However, if 3% raise and then funding the employer contribution at the same level as the county's contribution is $1,678,793. So just for order of magnitude, as the school division has said, that is a priority for the raise. Just wanted to let the board know what that math would be, because ultimately that could impact any sort of discussions related to the local transfer for the next fiscal year.
So a delta of about $100,000.
Well,
Cost sharing versus
It's
absorbing
two.
100%.
should be 250. I mean,
Yeah.
based on the slides, 336 where you currently are, 583 where Dr. Really's proposing, I believe.
I was looking at 470, but yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, there's some options. And
I would make the argument for our teachers is there's nothing that says we value you more than we are meeting your request, which has been laid out as top priority of 3%. And we're not coming up with ways for that to decrease. We were saying 3%, and we view your benefits as an instrumental part of your pay package. And we don't want you to have to decide if that 3% becomes an effective 1.5%, by chipping away at it. I'm glad we have all the numbers now to then take back and see how we can meet that. But I think 3% stays 3% when we meet that $583,000 number that we're going for. And I think that's a great sign to our staff, our educators. And I think if it's good enough for our county staff, I think it should be for people across Goochland representing Goochland in all the ways.
Well, it is a two-way street, and we could put this county in alignment with the schools, what they're currently doing.
We could also be going to those county members and saying, yeah, we're going to take away something that you've appreciated for many years. So I just don't like the potential I don't like the signaling of something like that when we are a county that has, great growth prospects and that is prosperous. We are not a poor county. And I
had
think.
a phone call from someone saying they feel undertaxed.
What?
I have not had a phone call from somebody saying I am not paying enough in taxes.
And I would venture a guess you're also not showing the comparables to those same citizens saying that they live in they're very fortunate to live in a county with our tax situation. So, I think that is critically important to stress is people want to live in Goochland because we have low tax rates. We treat our citizens incredibly well. I think everybody can complain. Of course, I have too much taxes. Yes, 0.001% is too much in the minds of many. But there's a reason people want to live in Goochland. It's because we are low taxes, we run balanced budgets, and we need to show it to our staff and our educators that we value them.
I'd hate to be the guy who got the old county higher insurance premiums, so for the record.
So board members, just for context too, I've shared with you individually that we have done some analysis since I presented to the board on February 17th, and we are the beneficiary of a change in our employer contribution for VRS to the tune of 2% from what is currently budgeted in FY26 to FY27, which results in nearly $1 million of expenditure savings that is not included in my proposal to you. We're also the beneficiary of some additional grant revenue. We accounted for the expenditure side for some public safety grants, but did not account for the revenue side. So when we account for that revenue, then that also provides some additional flexibility for our budget, as well as we're examining some changes in health insurance based on a 10% proposal to you and a 9.1% true rate at this point in time. So based on some of those factors, there are some dollars available that should we choose to, we could utilize to increase the school's transfer. The current proposal has a flat transfer from FY27, but ultimately would be seeking the board's direction on what we feel would be an appropriate increase, if any, in that local transfer. And again, it would allow the school division to plan as they're thinking about recruitment and retention and getting contracts prepared for the next academic year, but really wanting to see if there's any sort of direction from the Board of Supervisors that we could provide to us as staff, but also to the school board that we could prepare for May 5th in the next couple weeks.
So I'm a big fan of big reveals, but probably not the best time to wait to the end of the budget to do that. But for me, the way we approach this garnered a lot of feedback. I got a lot of emails, and to every person that reached out to me, I sent a link to the budget and said, where would you take it from? One of the things that came up was one of the citizens caught the transfer of the grants funds. So I believe that, and I've not had a single person reach out to me to say, keep going in the direction that you're going and holding it flat. So from my perspective, my citizens have talked to me and they've said, this is where we want you to spend our money. So I think we should, a lot less polite than I would like, especially for some of the school side, but we'll do it with that.
and Mr. Spoonhour may have been a little more articulate, but Dr. Armstrong, when you and I had a conversation, I spoke with Ms. Robinson and said, why didn't you start with the 3% and then backfill everything else, whether it was wrestling mats or an agricultural teacher, and take care of the people first? So my hope is that regardless of what happens, that teachers will be compensated as originally envisioned with the 3%, including the staff or however you want to do it. I'm clearly comfortable with your approach on the insurance. But so far as Dr. Rayleigh suggesting or noting that we have an ability to provide additional resources to the county or to the schools, I certainly would back that. I would like to make sure that we stay competitive with the teachers' compensation, that we don't go down the road of having to replace as opposed to retain. And if that does require or will be facilitated with an additional sum of money, which I'm not going to pretend I memorized, I'm for that. I would like to see us approach that. And then we can talk about the need for wrestling mats or an agricultural teacher or some of the others that are out there. I will harken back. I saw you wanted 2 interventionists, and I know Dr. Geyer gave me a great schooling in a good way on the benefits of the interventionists, and I don't know that you got fully staffed on interventionists in the last budget cycle. Is my memory working okay?
So we did end up getting to where we needed to be last year. The proposed at-risk funding we received from the state would cover 2 additional part-time interventionists that would round out the literacy intervention with some numeracy and mathematics intervention. So that would complete that team this year if we were able to access those funds.
Okay, so I'm thinking that's a yes.
That's a yes.
Okay. Ed, thank you. I can understand yes.
In terms of the pay increases for the teachers, I can see where some might argue that the 3% is, a little on the low side. Coming from private sector, it's about on par.
Right.
But I tell you what, taking on the premium increase, the health insurance premium increase, my company doesn't do that. So I think that that's a huge benefit to the teachers. And yeah, I support it. I think it's a huge retention tool.
Thank you.
And I know this is incredibly difficult to see, create a good data set for. Have we done an analysis though on our costs, perceived, actual, whatever it is, for losing teachers of various tenure?
Yeah.
Because that's something that we know is what we're ultimately playing with when we make those decisions on pay. And I'd argue that generally the arguments we get into over 3 or 4, 5% are any of those differences in dollars are swallowed up by losing 1 and definitely 2 people. But, do we have a way to say this is a budget, for budgetary analysis purposes, this is a fair number to look at?
It's your risk reward, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think we have a number like you
And
said,
it might-
but I know there's been studies.
I know last year, Ms. Worsing got me some attrition information, and it was what you would see from most employers. Very little about funding, but getting out of the business, moving, going back home, things like that. But it did, because last year was there was a big concern.
Yeah, I was gonna say Dr. Wagner, but Ms. Harris, our Human Resource Director, put together some data, right?
Right, so our data looked at employees who have left us and why, which I think is what you're getting at, because you're getting hard. In order, I don't know how to quantify that in terms of a dollar amount.
That's-
Happy to work through that
It's
exercise.
not,
I was
it's
trying
not
to
a trick
figure it
question, and
out.
I acknowledge how difficult it is. I guess it's a fair assessment, I'll just close with this. It's a fair assessment to say there are myriad costs with the loss of even one teacher that only go up. And, I mean, I think just from the perspective of a 45-day search, resume drop, the interviews, all that stuff, when you really add it up, I mean, I guess, let's just look at it in very simple terms. A teacher is going to be interviewed by how many different people coming into Goochland County Public Schools?
And county people or
Just
people all over?
they're going to be interviewed by, people in Goochland County.
Principal, HR, I mean, at least 5 people.
At least 5 people, so a
Spend at least
minimum
an hour interviewing.
5 hours,
Right.
probably
Manpower.
2.5 hours preparing for various things. I mean, yeah, we're in the,
Well, then you think about, you want to extend it even further, what's the cost when it comes to, cost to a student,
yeah,
you know? And-
True.
And what does that mean for a kid even, they do studies, you get 1 year of a bad teacher, and how does that impact a student for the next 8 years? So,
In my case, my entire life. So that's how far it impacted me. I have not forgiven Mrs. Lindsay.
come audit any class you like.
To Mr. Spoonhour's point, and this is an advantage of having been in the county for 36 years now. We had this kind of discussion on retention probably 20 years ago. Might have been when Dr. Stewart was superintendent. I won't swear to it. And me being me, I did a comparative, what were the attrition rates in Chesterfield, in Henrico, in Hanover, and we were pretty much the same. People weren't necessarily leaving Goochland because we were $3,000 or $4,000 less on a step 3. They were going into real estate. Spouse was being transferred to California. They, in a XY dominant industry, decided to stay at home with children. There were some consistencies that no matter how much money they had been offered or were receiving, there was still going to be attrition. And we were on a parity, more or less, with our surrounding neighbors. So I endorse what Mr. Botters has said, is we need to show respect and appreciation for them. And in this society, money is one way of measuring things. So I want to make sure we're competitive, but we were never going to not need HR. And you're still going to be interviewing new teachers. And hopefully you'll only get the one clunker a year that is going to probably impact the student. But that's why you have HR. I mean, we're going to be replacing teachers every year. The last study we did, though, is we saw that as teachers got more seniority, been with us 10 years and 12 years, then we saw the differentials between our surrounding counties, that somebody with 12 or 15 years of experience could go to a Henrico school and maybe see a $3,000 or $5,000 increase. So that's step work, if you will, that we might need to address, but I understand that we're very competitive on our entry level when we're hiring and somebody's fresh out of college at Virginia Tech or Longwood or Bridgewater, that they're getting a comparable offer from us as they would our neighboring counties. But we may need to look to decrease the attrition that Mr. Waters is alluding to, is what are we doing for the folks that really have been in the system for a couple of 3 years, and that's on y'all, but you're gonna come to us with a number, and that's where I'm interested, is what's the number? And I hope you start the budget with the compensation aspect of it, and then we can talk about wrestling mats.
I think there's an opportunity as we all reflect on my first budget, Dr. Armstrong's first budget, our first budget together as a team, is reflecting on how this process has gone, the timing of the processes, those kind of things. We have an opportunity to evaluate in the future so that ultimately we can provide more information on the front end to the schools. We have that communication potentially earlier. I think there's an opportunity as we plan and prepare for the FY28 budget to really think about how we can best do this in the future. Before we transition out of this topic, if there's no additional conversation, what I'm hearing is support for a market competitive raise of 3% and providing funding to support health insurance increases at the same rate, where school division employees are held harmless, much like county employees are held harmless. The cost of that being $1.565 million, which if looking back over time since 2016, the average increase year over year for local appropriations has been 4.1%. An increase in local appropriation for FY27 over its current base would be an increase of 5% in local appropriation, which is in line with, historical trends. But just wanted to put that data out there as we plan and prepare.
I would also just make this one addition to the salary increase landscape slide, because I think we're in agreement that about the incredible difficulties in comparing on an apples to apples basis ourselves to other counties. The one thing we can say, if we meet the premium increase, as Dr. Rayleigh just described, and offer our educators the exact same that county staff receive, is that come May, when we make our final decision, we will be able to say they are taking home their entire 3%. Whereas I would guess that Powhatan, Chesterfield, and Henrico will not be able to say the same thing. So in a world where all of these numbers get more and more convoluted, if we make as a goal to meet the premium increases as we're already doing with county staff, we can say, no, that 3% is a pure number. And so I call it just a sanity benefit, is we can say, yes, just on this chart alone, we're where we feel like we need to be, but we're probably at or near the top when all things are
So I
considered.
could add another column once I find out.
Yeah.
How much, I mean,
Well, and we will
I'd be
benefit,
curious.
we will benefit by the extra weeks that we have added to this process, to where the hope was that gained us more concrete knowledge.
Thank you.
I just hope that, the teachers, take it that way, take in the intention of what's behind it.
And you have a megaphone every morning, do you not? You principals have a megaphone every morning.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. I've heard this a couple of times. So when we presented our budget, we specifically tie all of our needs to our strategic plan, which is divided into 3 goals. And I feel like it maybe was misinterpreted that goal 1 was our priority, whereas those items were just classified for goal 1 in our strategic plan. Because I've heard it said, you brought in compensation and benefits after all of these instructional needs, but it really was just that goal 2 relates to our employees, engaging and inclusive experience for all staff and students. So I just wanted to make that point because I feel like I've heard a couple of comments that might have thought that that was goal 2 and not goal 1.
Didn't mean to be red lead.
That they're prioritized goals.
Yeah.
They weren't, these are categorical goals.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
correct, it's tied to our strategic plan. So hopefully that helps.
It does.
Yeah.
But I still, building a
Just
budget,
make
you
it
gotta
clear.
start with, first things
Make it
first, you pay the rent and the mortgage before you go to Disney World. And so, sorry, didn't mean to pop your bubble. So that's, I wanna make sure you have what you
Understood.
need.
Understood.
Any other conversation on operations and local transfer before we transfer to capital? Go.
All right.
All right.
Dr. Rayleigh, please, everybody interrupt me. This is exciting stuff here. I want to do 2 parts. The first part is really the year ahead of us with FY27, our capital needs. And back in January, Dr. Rayleigh asked I give him kind of 2 lists. One is sort of this one right here. What's your priority rank of all your FY27 capital needs? So I gave him that. And then the next one was, if you had the same funding that we had last year, what would those priorities be? And this is what I gave him. So if we had 1.7, roughly 1.76, I think was the number, million to work with, that's what we would have included in that priority list. and that was back in January. However, since January, Mr. Forbes, our maintenance director, did a little walk around with Dewberry and did an inspection on our boiler. And I'm sure you all know, the boiler is a critical apparatus in our secondary complex. There have been some high-profile failures of boilers in different places, and it's usually ugly when it does go bad. When they did the inspection, I know they found there's an insulation, Glenn, I want to make sure I'm saying this right.
Yes, sir, insulation falling off, decomposing on the vessel, the heat vessel, which is indicative of the age, 26 years old. It's when boilers get old like that, the internal components they're more susceptible to failing, just like a 26-year-old car. Even though it's been maintained, the age alone makes it more susceptible. But if your car breaks, you might have to tow it to the dealership. If a boiler fails, you could easily have a fire or explosion. So a quick Google search will pull up dozens of explosions around the country. One of them, February last year in Dinwiddie Middle School.
So the point being, we took this list, and I've given you a little bit of a different list, which is that we did away with, I don't know why I keep going the wrong way with this. Several of these, we talked as a team in the last week, and we said, what could we bump out a year to make sure that we bring the boiler. Now, it's still going to eclipse that 1.76 by a good bit too. The only reason the motor control ties into chiller work that was in our FY26 CIP, which is already in progress, so we have to have that. The video surveillance and intercom data work is also an already in progress project. So the boiler we would add that to that, and again, that would put us fairly far over that 1.76 level funding limit, but if I wanted to be transparent with everybody and make sure I updated that, just to reflect what we feel is a higher need for the boiler right now. So that's the year in front of us.
Video surveillance, just for clarity, is cameras for your elementary school. That's adding additional security cameras.
I know Peter.
Yeah, I believe it's upgrading the current camera system that we have, not adding additional.
Is intercom and data your overhead paging system, your Informacast system that you use for communication?
It's all, these are all projects, I think, just brings them right up to standard with some of our other schools right now.
Having just heard that the towering inferno possibilities of a bad boiler, why is that number 4 instead of?
That is, these could all be ones basically, and I'm happy I can edit this right now if you want. But we had to include all 4 of these just because the other 3 are things that are already in progress that we need. So, yeah, put a 1 by the boiler.
So we really don't have a choice is what I'm hearing. I mean.
There's always a choice.
Well, you're right. Thank you for
The
that.
risk
It's usually
increases,
7.
the risk is going to increase, I think, the longer you wait. We don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah, I concur.
Is there an expected life for the boilers? Because
26
Yes, sir.
years, I'm thinking.
It's 20 to 25 years, so all the mechanical assets in that building, they share with both sides, the middle and the high school, and they're all exceeded their life expectancy. Pretty much every component in that mechanical room is rated at 20 to 25 years. So the problem is, of course, the danger of a fire or explosion, and if it happens during the day, both dining halls are right next to the mechanical room. We have all the assets in there. We have kitchen staff, custodial staff, some maintenance people. So it could impact a lot of lives. If we're lucky enough to where it happens in the summertime and nobody's there and we don't need heat, you still have a long lead time, 30 to 40 weeks for the boilers. And then you have to, now you're gonna be into the school year where you're gonna need to heat. So you're gonna have to rent heaters and you're still gonna have to buy the boilers.
Right.
So it's.
Yeah, I
So
guess where I was
what year
going-
was the boiler planned on being? I'm
Yeah,
guessing we
that's
pulled
what I
it
was
in.
getting
It was in the FY27, but we had tailored that list down to that 1.7 million. It was still in the priorities for FY27.
Yeah, just making sure that we're tracking, the years of life of these boilers.
Yeah.
That way it's something we can plan for. It's like, hey, 2027, we're gonna have to replace this.
Right.
It's just,
In the past 2 months, we've started to have some failures, and some mild failures, like the heat exchanger needed to be worked on. I mentioned the insulation that came off the heat vessel. It's just indicative, everything is it's just old. We have safety valves that are 26 years old. We feel like we need to be proactive on this as opposed to reactive.
Right. Did I hear 30 to 40 months?
No, weeks.
Weeks, okay, thank you. I was like, holy man. It's like buying a fire truck, 2 years out.
Dr. Armstrong, the $1.65 million figure, is that a budget price or a bid price?
That is a budget price. Correct, Stephanie. We have
I
not put
think
this up.
that you've recently received an updated quote, right?
Yes, that's a current quote.
Okay.
Talk about CT addition and secondary improvements. A little more exciting, I think, than boilers. Just today, Tandra Harris, who's over in our procurement office, we've been working together to refine the RFP for architecture engineering services for CT additions, secondary improvements. And I think we've discussed this probably maybe a little bit back in September, and we continue to refine this. But we would like to ultimately, and of course, you know, a lot of this is hypothetical until we get someone who's an expert with the architecture and engineering background who can tell us, okay, questions become, do we put this addition as a freestanding dedicated facility? Do we attach it to the existing facility? Do we make a breezeway? We got to think about safety, efficiency. You know, one observation that came up was that it was going to be more expensive to tie it into our fire suppression system that's existing at the secondary complex rather than just make it its own facility with, you know, a dedicated system. These are all the questions I think we're going to need to answer with the support of our architect or engineer. So that RFP should be on the street, we're hoping, next week. The programming part of this, as you know, we have a 5-year lease for GTEC now from the county, from our current Workforce Development Center down on Route 6. And we would move all of those programs back over to the secondary complex. Most of them would go into this addition. We do have an alternative education room over there as well. And then we have several programs that currently exist inside the high school that would be better suited to being in this dedicated facility, including ag, RTC, and TV video production. The numbers we got initially would be somewhere in the range of 30,000 square feet. One other thing I didn't, there it is, sorry, you see the new child development. One thing that's come up is that is one of our CT clusters, is early childhood education. It can fulfill a need for not only high demand jobs, but also perhaps providing an on-site daycare program for employees, even the community, that could be run and support with students and teachers and professionals. So some common space in that building, we're thinking somewhere in the range of 30,000 square feet. And the number we started with was right there at 20 million, but I know, again, we will need to get further into this when we get the support of an expert, an architect, an engineer. But those are our kind of the big vision for this. Key considerations, really timing, civil engineering, we'll need to really account for that. Just mentioned before, do we attach this or do we make it a freestanding facility? The other part I don't want to make sure I don't miss this is just that, you know, the bond was about secondary improvements. We've also had needs in our middle school, our band room definitely needs to be expanded. I think that band room, if anyone who was around back in 2007 when they built the middle school will tell you that it was kind of the space that was left over and they kind of shoved a band in there. We have a growing band program right now, a growing chorus program. We know that we can take some of the spaces that we vacate in our secondary complex and retrofit and make this a really efficient project. We can create even better spaces for fine arts and music. The other pieces we want to think about too that we've added in the RFP just for feasibility purposes is, would it make sense for economies of scale to look at wrestling room potentially and maybe again, it's an idea of where we currently have the RTC. Could that be a wrestling room down by the stadium? An auxiliary gym has been talked about for years. And that was, we learned from Coach Fowler today, which I wasn't aware of this, that it was intended to be an auxiliary gym right off the locker rooms in the back of the school. I originally thought it was supposed to be where the sidewalk kind of ends. Where the sidewalk ends in the middle school was actually designed to be an expansion of the middle school. The auxiliary gym was supposed to be installed right there behind the locker rooms, and it was made that way. We met with Tom today, heard more about the master Parks and Rec plan too. I think what we're proposing here would dovetail well with a lot of what he wants to do too. We got to think about parking, the work that's going to happen in that area, not just with the Parks and Rec master plan with the Fairground Road extension. We know there's a lot to think about that's happening there in that footprint. We would need to relocate the greenhouse. We need a new dig site for heavy equipment. And then there's going to be specialized costs with this, specialized equipment. And we want this to be a flexible space that can really adapt to the changing needs and the jobs as they evolve over time. So a lot of questions still out there. It's exciting. I mean, I can't wait to sit down with an architect and hopefully get some of you to join us to go visit some current facilities that are in the state and maybe even in the region, see what they're doing in some other divisions and get some ideas around that. So, but RFP should be ready to go here pretty soon for A&E.
Great.
One thing I didn't notice on this list, Dr. Armstrong, is, and I had mentioned this to you, administrative offices being central to the county. I mean, that space, not only is your space where we could use it for the courthouse project that we already have in planning, but I see, not as an educator, but as just a general citizen, the value of our administration being central to everything that's going on. Do you see that as a potential value for schools? If we're already undertaking a 50-year project that has Goochland's growth in mind, would that be a good efficiency to add to this?
Yeah, so I just want to be clear. So our current facility, our central office
Yes.
facility, which is right there above Fire and Rescue,
Yes.
Moving to a more central location.
Yes.
I think we would all agree that would be appreciated if that were possible.
Okay. Yeah, I see a project like this as a great way to do that.
And I mentioned before, I think that space that we're currently in has potential for Chief Ferguson. I know that he's busting his seams with everything he has downstairs too, so. But again, those are decisions that are made in different rooms.
And all that was evaluated as part of the space study and considered as schools were a part of that conversation.
Just a couple more notes here.
I view CTE as a huge differentiator of Goochland County Public Schools from other districts. And I think the stats are readily available in terms of the number of students leaving with associate's degrees and, as ag being something we, have students who already come in with considerable interest, whether it be their families or just living in a rural county. I mean, is it a fair statement to say that CTE is a key differentiator and something where if we're investing money into it, we can be potentially a one of one rather than just keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak? Okay, I mean, I think that's a key. I compare it to Parks and Rec considerations. Why do we want to build 8 soccer fields if that is going to look puny relative to what Chesterfield did and what Hanover did and what Hanover did? But I feel like CTE is something where we can look at our neighbors and across the Commonwealth and say, you're not going to have this and you're not going to compete with us for years to come.
We have so many unique opportunities in this county right now around CTE. We already have a strong development. Our ROTC program, which falls under CTE, is also continues to grow. And I know that Bruce's work right now to get our Academy of Robotics off the ground. We're looking at just making sure our programs adapt to the workforce need. You've heard me say all this since I walked in the building. And I do agree, Mr. Waters, that we want this to be what distinguishes our division.
Good.
So board members, just a few data points for order of magnitude and scope. Mr. Lyle reached over and asked how much is remaining in the 2021 GVA bonds. So the school's portion of that is $18.2 million. So once we get an understanding of the costs associated with the architecture and engineering costs, and should the school board choose to sign a contract, I guess we probably need to talk about the appropriation before you sign a contract, but once we get more information from the schools about potential costs associated with that, one of the things we could do as a county is a reimbursement resolution, so that any sort of funds that we would front on beginning to get them started on the A&E, we could reimburse the county through any sort of future bond proceeds, much like we're having a discussion related to Station 7. So those mechanisms are helpful to allow projects to get started until we determine the associated financing. But there is $18.2 billion left over from the 2021 referendum.
So going back, you had 20 at the bottom, and then this is an additional 10, so 30 is
And
your bogey.
And I want to be careful because I'm not the expert, and we'll really lean on our architect engineer to kind of give us a little more clarity on what some of this is going to cost. But the 10 million we feel, having talked to Ryan with MVP, that could be the money to retrofit the secondary spaces. An auxiliary gym would be about 4 million, wrestling room. So 10 for those other improvements, and then let's say 20 as I'm sitting here now. And again, I anticipate that could be a little bit more too, even for what we're going to do with our CT center. So grand total all in 30 as we sit here today.
Is that, I mean, you're talking about things that you're gonna convey to the street, just to the street, to the planners behind it. I would just ask that you convey, we want a 50-year building. We want them to be thinking broadly in those terms, and even to the extent of a boiler, you know.
Right.
Do we need to be thinking in terms of what's gonna need 2 cycles of investment versus just one, so we are effectively forecasting all those costs moving forward?
That's all I got, Dr. Rim.
Yeah.
Any other comments, board members? Right, you got anything, Dr. Wheeler?
No, sir.
All right, I guess we will adjourn to the countywide March Town Hall and Boardroom 250, 6 p.m. on Tuesday, March 24th. Meeting adjourned.